great to meet you today, and thank you so much for taking the time to share your journey. We'd like to start with a bit of introduction, so if you could go ahead and tell us who you are, where you're from, that kind of thing, that would be wonderful.
Sure, absolutely. My name's Nolan. I work in biotech. I grew up in Minnesota and Hong Kong, kind of a split there. At 18, I came out to Massachusetts to go to school at Northeastern University to study chemical engineering. And I found out last year that I had a tumor in my brain.
Wow, wow. And so Minnesota and Hong Kong, that's not a common background. How did that come about?
Just my parents working biotech, especially. So my dad works in biotech as well, or used to before he retired, and his job just brought him out to Asia.
Wonderful, wonderful. Oh, so you were from Minnesota originally? Is that
hmm
fair? So what kind of biotech do you do? Any specific area you focus on?
I'm in the pharmaceutical startups. I've bounced around, so I've done reproductive, I've done cancer, and I'm in microbiome at this point.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. So I'm in biotech as well for the day job. The trials and tribulations of small biotech, folks don't realize that it's a lot of choppiness.
Exactly. There's a lot of uncertainty, especially right now in the biotech.
Because getting closer to what you as a patient go through is important for providers to enhance empathy for each other as we help each other through, for systems as they think about ways to serve patients. So it's all for the good, so to speak, in the ecosystem here. You said you found out you had a tumor last year in the midst of COVID-19. Certainly the pandemic is here. How did you find out? I mean, was it gone in for a checkup, or was there something that happened? Please walk us through how you discovered the tumor.
Sure. It actually happened during work at a meeting. I was wearing my big Bose headphones, and I felt like I had a lot of feedback within my headphones. It seemed like there were, three or four overlapping songs playing. It was disturbing, just to say the least. It basically stopped me from 5 to 10 seconds where I wouldn't be able to grasp any part of one song, whether it was like the chorus or the melody. And I had to stop in the middle of speaking during a meeting where I just couldn't move for a second. And it was just very distracting. I thought at that point that it was just feedback from my headphones. It happened twice within about a week when I was wearing the headphones. So naturally I thought, hey, what could this be? So I did a little bit of Googling, a little searching at that point, and the only thing that it related to was auditory hallucinations, which is very, very attributed to PTSD. And I didn't think my job was that bad. So I called my primary physician, had a conversation with him, and said with Debbie, something's wrong. I can't, this keeps happening. It could just be headphones, but let's figure something out. And at the time she had kind of said, let's just watch it. It could be a lot of things, could be stress. You're in a pandemic. Let's just take a chance. Let's take a minute. So it just went away for about 3 months, and it came back in the summer. And I noticed, hey, I'm not wearing headphones this time. Something, again, let me call my physician here. So at that point, I basically say, hey, I got to get an MRI. There's something going on with my brain. I don't know what could happen. And they took an MRI. It was actually about a week before I started a new job. So the physician at that point, I went in for 8 a.m. MRI, and they told me, you got to wait here. I was there for about eight hours sitting in the ER, and the physician came back. The neurosurgeon actually came down and said, you have a tumor. You have something in your brain. And they didn't say tumor at that point. They said a mass, and that was kind of we don't know what it is unless we look at it. So it was located at my left temporal lobe near the Wernicke location. And that is the capability to speak. That's the area that allows you to pull words out of your brain to translate your thoughts into communication. The surgeon said, I think it's a glioma or an astrocytoma, but the only way to find that out will be to do an awake craniotomy. And the reason they would do a awake craniotomy was because where the location was, again, was my speech part of the brain.
So the second time the auditory hallucinations happened,
Mhm.
were they more severe or persistent than they had been 3 months prior? Is that sort of what prompted the ER visit, or was it that you were just weren't wearing the headphones and so you realized something was different? It wasn't just an electronic situation; it was actually, something going on. Describe that thought process of, that day where you decided I need to go see someone.
Yeah, it certainly was impacted by the fact that I wasn't wearing headphones. But at the end of the day, I sat while it was happening. And again, just about 5 to 10 seconds. And it was surreal. I was just outside of my body at that time, where I was just listening to this mass of noise happening in my head. And I think it's important to listen to our bodies, because I wouldn't have caught it if I hadn't said, yeah, what could it be? It could be anything. It might be just be stress or something. But if you notice something that's weird, I've always thought that it's important to make sure that you keep your body healthy. So
And there were no other signs or symptoms at the time that sort of got you thinking or questioning, or was it purely the auditory hallucination?
purely the auditory hallucinations, and what it turned out to be actually was minor seizures that were pushing down on that part of my brain. So the five, I was seizing those 5 to 10 seconds that it was happening. So some people won't notice what is happening, because it's just a weird, it can present in a number of different ways.
And how frequently would you say it happened that day when it prompted you to go into the ER?
Yeah, just once, just
Oh,
once.
wow, wow. So you were listening intently then. That's great. That's wonderful.
Yeah, and it was because, so in total it happened 3 times, and that third time was my sign of, look, this is not real. This is not right. Fix something here. So
So the surgeon comes back and he says to you, you have a mass. He didn't say how old you were. How old are you?
sorry, I am 31 years old. This happened when I was 30 years old.
Yeah, so you're 30 years old. A surgeon comes in to see you and says you have a mass. How are you reacting to that? Because that's not something that a 30-year-old expects to hear.
It's a good question. I think at that point, the surgeon came in and basically said, we have to do craniotomy. And what he had talked through was that in the past, the treatment was just a wait and see if the mass grows, see if anything happens. And that was the way to determine if it was, benign or if it was malignant. At that point, I basically thought of, hey, all right, let's do whatever we need to do. Just get this thing out of my head. I don't want to deal with it. So I think, certainly you could think that was a little bit of shock. It could a little bit of, you know, stress. But at that point, my response was, all right, I have to first tell my family, and two, let's schedule this thing. Let's figure out the date that I can go into the surgery and fix what is happening in my head.
So you're there. Are you at the hospital by yourself when this happens? And do you just call your folks right away? How does that work?
Yeah, so I texted my wife and my mom while I was sitting waiting in the ER, because the first part was in the MRI. It was supposed to be just a routine check. So the moment that they said, you have to stay here, we want to get some blood tests. When the blood tests came back negative, which was the doctor's way of checking if it was an infection, if it was an infection in my brain, or if it was a mass, I knew that there was something, and the likelihood was that it was a tumor.
So I guess you go into a bit of shock. You say, let's do whatever we need to do, the craniotomy to get this out of my head, as you had said. Was it surgery the next day? How did it work?
It actually waited, we actually waited about a month. So I got back from hospital and it was great. My entire family was great about this entire thing. My wife, my friends reached into their network, and I didn't actually get the surgery from the surgeon that first saw me, we talked with a couple of different doctors that would recommend different surgeons. And one of them, the feedback that we got was her hands are like wizard hands. And if any member of my family would have a tumor, she would be the one I would want to operate. So that is extremely high praise. So we actually went with Dr. B, came back, left and went to California, then came back to get it removed. And it was September 7th that I had it removed.
So wonderful that you work in healthcare, and so your friends, et cetera, are able to pull into their networks. You said your dad works in biotech as well.
Mhm.
And so how many folks did you end up talking to get to that Dr. V, the wizard, so to speak, and where did you find her?
3. So we have a friend that worked diagnostics on tumors to identify what's the grade, what is the mutation, what part of it, and a friend identified that worked for a company that does a lot of diagnostics. Talked to somebody that worked there that used to work with Dana-Farber, knew the neuro-oncology team, and made the recommendation.
Oh no, that's fantastic. And yeah, I mean, I have friends who are at that company as well, and so
Yeah.
that would be a great avenue to take if you're faced with such a situation, right? They're well connected to different clinicians, and they can route you to the right. Great to hear that you were able to get connected to, and being in Boston as well, right? That is a
Exactly.
benefit with all of the great clinicians and institutions. You either probably want to be in the Bay Area or in Boston, right? So that's or maybe Houston as well. But congratulations, so for finding the
Yeah,
right person.
exactly. And I think there's also, Minnesota, there's Texas, there's a couple of different places. So we were very fortunate that Boston does have a high population of doctors and great physicians in the area.
That's great. So it's about a month between the diagnosis, or sort of the finding of the mass.
They were not definitively saying that it was a tumor. And I think that's a little bit of they need to cover themselves so that if it does come back as something else, it's not a definitive, but it was high certainty that it was going to be a tumor coming back.
Gotcha. And so for that month before the surgery, the craniotomy, what's that like for you? How are you processing? What support are you leaning into? Are you looking for information? And were there things that were helpful to you?
Yeah, I certainly did a number of calls with different oncology physicians, neuro-oncology doctors, and looked into different avenues of recovery. I think the biggest thing for me after the surgery was this was going to impact, as previously discussed, was going to impact my communication capabilities. And that was a huge thing for me, not only for my job, but for my life, for every aspect. So I set different goals for myself for what I wanted to do after the surgery happened. And so there was definitely a little bit of how do I get back to normal kind of deal.
Sure. And what kinds of advice were you given, and from where did you seek the most information?
So there was 2 things I would say. I think one, and both from physicians, one from a friend of ours from college that said, you're an N of 1. Everything else is these studies can't attribute the entire part of your life or your entire life. So don't read too much in statistics. More, your journey is your own. The second part was just give yourself time. So I think I would say, especially myself and my family are very, very much goal oriented and sort of seeing the next step. And so I think especially after the surgery, there were moments that I would try and do something, or I would try to test my recovery, and I would just fail doing something that I used to be able to. And I would get very, very frustrated with myself that, and it's very, very odd that you go to the doctor, you're fully capable, you're absolutely able to accomplish all the things that you've always wanted to do here. And then 8 hours after surgery, everything's completely changed. So for me, I would get mad at myself if I couldn't write an email, or I couldn't tell a story or I couldn't understand something on the computer. And I think there was a couple of times that there just had to be a little bit of a give yourself time. You will recover. You had someone cutting into your brain not 1 week ago or not 1 month ago. And so that's certainly an aspect that I've taken away from that. So.
Sure. And in the workup to the craniotomy, did the doctors or the nurses give you any useful information? Did they tell you what to expect? Did they refer you to any resources at all?
I'm sure there were some resources. I didn't go too much into what to expect. I think they gave me a pretty good understanding of what was going to happen. And there certainly was aspects of, all right, so what's going to happen, but you can't really prepare to being awake while someone's behind you cutting into your head. It's very, again, surreal of having a conversation and trying to carry on a conversation with the nurse in front of you, asking you about, well, tell me about a book or tell me about, your friends, and then hearing kind of the in the background. So,
Yeah, I can only imagine. I can only imagine.
yeah.
So through this month into the workup before we get to the surgery itself, your wife accompanying you to appointments, were there any appointments between that time to sort of get through?
Yeah, definitely conversations with my neuro-oncologist talking about what could happen during the conversation of what happens afterwards. And is this the end of it, or is there additional treatments that are going to be required? I think there was one or two conversations, certainly a conversation with my primary physician. I think that would pretty much summarize everything that happened before.
And so we get to the day of the surgery. What is that like for you? Given anything, given any instructions, and then you get to the surgery suite. You said you're awake. What is that like for you?
Yeah, so couldn't eat or drink 12 hours before surgery. It happened, it was very early. It was probably 6 a.m. to start. Walking in, they did sedate me to start everything. So to put me onto the stretcher, to move me into it. And going into this suite, I don't know if there's too much to describe it. I walk in, I notice that my brain is on the screen. There's a 3D print of here is where we're going into. It's just moving very, very quickly. There's probably 10 people in this suite. There's an MRI in there so they can check during they're doing the surgery and whatnot. And I remember I immediately are put to sleep and then brought back up, and there's just blanket or a tarp that's in front of my face, and I can just hear movement around behind me of people moving around, figuring out what they're going into. And then I just see that the one face that I saw for the entire time. And I unfortunately cannot remember her name, probably because of the, surgery and the sedation, and then beginning to just having a conversation. And there's times that they would probe and ask a question, and I would not be able to answer correctly or remember, well, where are you right now? Is it Beth Israel, or what's happening right now? Okay, and who's performing the surgery? And it's Dr. B, and I have a distinct memory of when somebody asked me who's performing the surgery and saying Dr. B, and I hear behind me, that's me, I'm behind you. So it was so fast to just start in that surgery that it happened so quickly that I don't know if I have too many more words about that. So
No. I think and when you're in it, right? Things, as you mentioned, time warps a bit probably when you're in something as intensive as what you're describing. So the surgery completes. What was the recovery like for you? How long did it take? Were there any sort of lingering effects from the recovery? Talk us through that.
yeah, certainly. So they brought me down to the recovery room. I was in there waiting. I had a nurse kind of sitting with me for about 12 hours. So surgery completed probably at 7 p.m. had a couple of MRIs in between, eventually got moved to, ongoing recovery. And I wanted to leave almost immediately. I did not want to sit within the hospital. So I got out as quickly as possible. I knew I had to go through recovery, but I stayed in bed for about 2 days. So I left the hospital the day after I got back to our home, stayed for about 2 days, bed recovery. And then the next 6 months, I was regaining my communication capabilities and my ability to retrieve words. So that was the biggest part for me, is that it was very difficult for me to think of a story or be able to communicate. I was trying to describe something happening quickly. I would say, that car moved quickly. How quickly do you think they're going? That was very quick. Where otherwise I would try and use different adjectives, synonyms, well, that was fast, or that was quick, or that was swift. So my communication was very, very limited into how I was trying to communicate with not just work people, but just at home. I found if I was speaking extremely quickly, I would lose pronouns, where he's become she's, or she's become they, or they becomes he's. And it was without rhyme or reason. One thing that is continual, where I think I'm still going through recovery, I can't remember the words of songs as they're coming through. So we were at a friend's birthday, and people were singing Happy Birthday, a song that I've probably heard 1,000 times at this point. There's always something at a restaurant as a kid, relatives, and the words, because it is part of a song that is moving through, I'm not able to retrieve the words fast enough to actually sing the song with it. So I'm still finding communication problems there, or gaps in my communication. But as we talked about earlier, got to give myself some time and recover slowly, because it may not come back immediately. So I need to be patient with that.
Yeah, no. I mean, hey, you went through a very invasive experience with the surgery. So right after sort of this surgery itself, did the doctor say, "Hey, resounding success, we removed it all," or what were the way it was characterized to you?
Yeah, they said that they thought they got a full resection, which would be a full removal of the tumor and any parts that would be remaining within the section of my brain.
And so congratulations. That was a great thing to hear. Did they mention at the time that speech and memory issues might persist for a while? What was sort of the things that they told you to expect, and is that in fact how you experience things?
They did say that it would be 6 months to a year before I would be fully recovered. They said 6 weeks until I felt good enough to really be competent at what I previously was doing, so work or activities back home. So I did experience similar time frames that they offered me. Is that
So this is interesting to me because you were working. It was August, and then September, a month later, when you have the surgery. Do you stop working from August to now, or what happened on the work front for you?
So I've previously mentioned I'm a little bit stubborn and we're very goal oriented. So I was starting a new job. I found out the week before that I was supposed to start that job that they had found a tumor in my brain. So I had about 3 weeks to get fully incorporated within this new job. And then I went under for this surgery. And the first thing that I was trying to do is figure out exactly how much did I lose. So I actually went back to work a week after my surgery to see what I was capable. I was not a competent employee at that time. So it did take about 6 weeks for me to get back to really making an impact, but my job was very, very accommodating. And I did find that, while I was working from right afterwards to about a month and a half afterwards, there were times that my brain just got very tired, and that was due to, the inflammation, some of the damage that had incurred. It was drilling and stripping parts of my gray matter in order to remove this tumor. So it was definitely swelling. So my brain was definitely going through recovery, and I was using that a little bit as a marker for my recovery. Is how did work feel like this week? How did it feel the week after, the week after? So that was where I'm at. So I've been successfully, in my opinion, working well for probably 5 months now after that surgery.
No, no, and so first of all, that you were able to go back to work a week after, and that you were sort of, as you say, very goal-oriented yourself. Describe that feeling of your brain being tired. How did that manifest for you? And what types of things, as you said, you listened to your body. What types of things did you take on, and when did you know and realize you needed to maybe take a break? And how did you manage that process? And maybe working from home helps in this. You can tell me.
Yeah, certainly working from home was definitely helpful throughout this process. Going back into the office, I'll give you an anecdote after this, but the first week after the surgery, when I was trying to work, I probably worked 4 to 5 hours the week. And what I found was it took me hours to write emails or to respond to somebody, where I would see something that I needed to respond, provide input on, and I would try and write an email, and it would take me an hour, take me 2 hours, and I would respond. I would stop, I would look at it, and I could just tell my brain was saying, this is too much. Take a minute, just sign off for today. And so that was kind of my indication, where after I had done work for a couple of hours, I would notice that all of my processes or processing within my brain would just stop down, and it would say, go take a nap, you're done here, this is too much. And that's basically my indication. That was a good baseline of the next few weeks, where I would know if I noticed my processes were slowing, I would start stopping, and I would either cancel or move meetings, and I would say, I'm not going to add my best here, and I'm not going to be able to provide any value to any of these conversations. So I'm going to take the time and give myself some time to really develop and recover here. So back to the in office. So I didn't go back into the office for probably 3 months afterwards. I did have this giant scar on my my head, and when I did go back, I wasn't able to get a haircut because it was still sensitive. It was still, so I basically wore hats for still wearing one for about 4 or 5 months after the surgery. I did get a haircut eventually, but just started getting used to wearing a hat because I didn't want to have this goofy haircut going into the office.
So work from home makes it a bit easier because I guess folks will only see the front of your head, right, with the way the Zoom works. And certainly the hat helped when you did make it back into the office.
Mm-hmm.
Did everyone kind of know that that's why you were wearing a hat? Does that sort of, it became a non-issue, or were there conversations that occurred because of it? Or
I think I probably let 10 people in my company that I had surgery. Now, having said that, I did inform everyone recently as an announcement to the dinner that we're hosting in May. And, personally, my thought behind that was I didn't want people to treat me differently after it happened. I wanted to, and especially as a new person or a new coworker, I wanted people to judge me based off of my capability and not to judge me based off of my disease, as I would say. So
no, that's great. And what was the receptivity to the announcement? Did folks reach out?
they did, and I think one of the biggest thing that I've learned from having cancer is that so many people have been impacted to it. And when we tell someone, I won't call it 90%, probably about 60% of the time, the response is, oh, I know all about this. Someone in my family was struggling with this as well, or my uncle, my brother, my husband, my wife. So there's a big community out there that is struggling with or has experienced something like this. So it is, I think it's important to communicate when you're ready, of course, because I think there's a large group of like experienced people out there.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And the more I feel that we share our journeys, the more we help each other through. A lot of the fear that we have in our lives, as my reflection, is uncertainty of not knowing
Mhm.
what comes next, of, is it only me who experienced this difficulty?
Mhm.
And so to me, this is sort of the genesis of why we're having these conversations.
Mhm.
So talk to me about how do you be kind to yourself, right? And allow yourself the time. You mentioned being goal oriented, but then you're confronted with a situation where, an email takes an hour to 2 hours. You have to move meetings, and how does that make you feel as someone who does want to have an impact and contribute, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, I think to go back to when I was first received this diagnosis, I was pissed. I think frankly, I don't smoke, I don't do drugs, I go to the gym 5 to 6 times a week. So I was extremely mad because I felt like my body had kind of given up on me or had failed me there. How often does it happen? Well, turns out a lot, but being 30 years old and getting this, hey, you've got cancer. There's not a lot to prepare you for that. So it did take me a little bit of time to just adjust and realize there's certain things that are just completely out of my control and out of my hands. This is like winning the worst lottery that's out there. But I think it does take a little bit of time and I again I do have to say I had an incredible support group. My sister, my wife, my parents, and I have an absolutely fantastic group of friends that stood by me throughout the entire way, and understanding of what I was going through was was key to me being able to accept that. And we've worked with my friends and my family to start kind of watching. My wife still does it. If I say the wrong word, she'll gently say, "That's not the right one. You got to work on that. What's the word that you're actually looking for here?" So it was having support, others accepting me, that really helped me to accept the situation as well.
Oh wow, no, that is fantastic to hear. It sounds like there were folks around you who were there to support you through your journey, right? And to help you when words might have failed or thoughts might not have come to you as quickly. So any other sort of things that you've had to sort of adapt to or adjust to, or that you've noticed? You mentioned the processing ability, right? Reaching for words. How are there any sort of memory issues that you've encountered, either short term or long term, in terms of, where you were prior to the surgery at 100%? Where would you say you are today?
Yeah, I would say I'm probably at 95% at this point, which is, I think that I'm very lucky in that it sounds weird. I'm lucky that 7 months after surgery, I'm back to 95% at this point. What was identified was a phase or a grade 2 tumor. Right now, my treatment is every 3 to 4 months. I go in and I get an MRI. I have a day where I get blood, I get an MRI, I go see my doctor, and we are just monitoring at this point. And that's extremely lucky in that it could be way worse. I think there's definitely other people that deal with much more side effects or after sidewalk. That's exactly what I said. Side effects. So I'll just start there. Side effects that are more long term. And the other aspect is that, especially with gliomas and astrocytomas, there hasn't really been a new treatment in 40 years or so, probably the 70s or the 80s. So everyone that has a secondary treatment is either radiation or chemotherapy. And there's a number of companies out there, but that's extremely hard on the body. And it's very intrusive. And I haven't had to do that at this point, which I'm thankful for at this point. And actually, that's exactly why we're starting to do fundraising and starting to do awareness, because I think that we desperately need treatments that are less affecting and a less of an interest. I'm losing it. Sorry.
No worries, no worries.
We need treatments that are less intrusive and give different offerings for patients that do have to go through this, especially for brain cancer patients. It's been too long, and part of the reason why there haven't been treatments is because it's not one of the more attractive treatments or disease. There's not a lot of visibility, and it's difficult because there's the brain, the
No worries.
blood brain. Yeah.
No worries.
So I think that's where we're coming from, trying to work with the National Brain Tumor Society, trying to raise funds for research.
First of all, that is a wonderful thing for you and your family to be doing. To me, when we experience these things and it drives us with a bit of a sense of urgency to do something, that's when the change can happen. As you
Right.
mentioned, 40, 50 years since something new has come to patients, these stories will hopefully spark that awareness, that appreciation that there is a need, and hopefully it'll inspire someone to do something. And I think that's all we can hope for, and maybe it doesn't help us ourselves, but it helps others, and that's okay too, right? That's part of why we are in the business that we're in, is to help others.
Exactly.
So
And
wrap up.
apologies for all of the editing that are going to be required for that
No,
last section.
hey, no, you did extremely well from an and an perspective. This is the point of the conversation. First of all, thank you so much for the time. Really
Of
deeply
course.
appreciative. Point of the conversation where I just sort of ask you. This is the inspiration part, right? 95% information, 5% inspiration. What do you have in terms of advice for others who are encountering a situation that, other folks 30 years old get this news that no 30-year-old should get? What do you say to them?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that we've talked about today, but one is listen to your body. If something feels wrong, it's okay to ask, and it's okay to talk to your doctor. And if you want a second opinion, it's okay to do that. I think two is be kind to yourself, especially as you're recovering and moving through things. It's important to take the time for yourself and not, like me, just try and go ahead rushing through. And then the last one is that everyone is an N of themselves, of N1. And statistics are good for getting information, but they aren't defining. They do not define the person, and the person is not a lost cause right from the beginning. So everyone has their own journey and their own fight.
Oh no, well, Nolan, thank you so much for the vulnerability, right? It takes some courage to share your story, to share the journey so openly, but also for sharing your advice and guidance for others who are encountering this. It's a scourge, right? And we have to work together to overcome it. No one knows your journey, as you said, N of one. No one knows your journey better than you do, and so this is you, Nolan, speaking to other people who might be diagnosed with brain cancer, and so this
Right.
is. So I think you did a fantastic job. So thank you so much for taking the time. Appreciate it, really do. And thank you so much, and congratulations. Hey,
Yeah.
95%. That's a good place to be. So congratulations.
Yeah. Appreciate it. Thanks for the time, Manny.
Thank you as well. Take care. Enjoy the rest of the day here. Bye bye.
You too. Thanks.